So I pitched a tent in my co-founder's backyard and lived in it for 6 months while I developed this company. It was actually one of my favorite experiences, but that's the level of commitment that I had, and that is common amongst founders.
Wow! You are listening to the Bold Business Podcast, where you will hear firsthand experiences about what it really takes to ensure market relevance and your company's future.
We must evolve as people and as leaders to keep going and make the achievements that we want to make. It is sometimes grinding. It is sometimes overwhelming. And regardless, we dig down and we do whatever it takes. And let me just tell you, in that doing whatever it takes, we're building perspective, which is the one thing that cannot be replaced by technology. And I'm telling you, this is going to be a conversation that you want to listen to, because not only are we talking about purpose, how do we get through an evolution of a business to the point where it takes many years to actually understand what we want our purpose to be? We're also going to be talking about what does it really mean to do whatever it takes. And Robbie tells us that. Robert Herr is the founder of the Empower Project. I was excited to have him on, not only as a founder, not only as a creator, but also as somebody who believes in the greater good. His startup journey, which he does share with us a lot about, he started at 20 while in college in Santa Barbara. And now, over 13 years later, he is talking about the journey he had, where he is at, and what he is committed to continue to do. Doubling down, sticking with it, never giving up, has allowed him to understand that design philosophy is important, that sustainability is important, especially when we're talking about mobile power, because that's really what the Empower Project is. It's about portable power. And then to be best in class and to make a difference where possible, not only for us in our everyday lives, but when we need it most. I want to start with, how come you're a 15-year entrepreneur?
Yeah. Have always been a person that has followed my curiosity more than listened to what I should be doing. So rebellious by nature, perhaps. And that certainly led me to self-employment, right? I've always been directed by my curiosity. And so I was always looking for ways to make a living, but not have to work on someone else's schedule. And that was the original, as a teenager, like, how do I make a profit and make a living and, do the things I'd like to do and acquire the things I'd like to acquire, live that lifestyle without having to clock in and clock out to someone else's job and someone else's thing. I just saw it very clearly. Someone's business is their vision, is their life, and you can work for them or you can try to create your own. And I knew that innately. So and there wasn't a lot of education around entrepreneurship in Southwest rural Colorado in the 90s and early 2000s. I had to learn.
Actually, nowhere.
Yeah. Very small pockets of Silicon Valley and Xerox PARC and stuff. But there was it wasn't, and especially where I was, everything's 10 years behind where we're at on the coast. I was always just like, how do I find my own way? And it's just been a natural characteristic of myself. And I know there are all different types of entrepreneurs, but I'm one of those unfortunates that was born this way, or fortunates, depending on how you like to look at it.
You're singing to the choir, friend. We're not even to the choir. We're in the same choir. That's what that is. Give me an experience when you were a teenager and you were realizing this. What was the first adventure out that you were like, I want to acquire funds so I can do what I want? What did that first role, job, money acquisition look like?
My first real official formal business was when I was 20 years old. That started by when I was at Santa Barbara City College, and I was looking for kind of a way to start a business and looking for a concept and whatnot. And luckily there was this little entrepreneurship club at the Santa Barbara City College, and there was 6 people in it. And it was a Friday morning. So Friday mornings in college are like, nobody's going to go to a club. Except for 6 people that were trying to get something on their resume to transfer to university. And they didn't really actually care about entrepreneurship. I went in and I was like, I want to learn how to start a business here. Like, how do I incorporate a company? How do I raise money? How do I, whatever, right? Validate a product idea. And so there was a little club, and the director of the club at the time was like, I'm going to get a seasoned entrepreneur to come in here and mentor and invest micro investments, $500 into a team. And I was like, okay, great, I'll go recruit people. And the next semester, I was the president of the entrepreneurship club. I was the only person in it. And the six others had moved on to university. And I went and recruited people. And the next year, we had 35 people. As the next semester, I had 35 people in the club. And the seasoned entrepreneur that the director brought in, Melissa Moreno, is the director of the entrepreneurship club at the time. She was fantastic. And she brought in this gentleman who started a bunch of businesses, and he started teaching us and putting $500 into teams. That's where the first company I started was born. And that was Fuel Box. And it wasn't even the first concept I was working on with that in that little club, but it came about. And we realized there's a pain point of losing our phone chargers, and they were $30, and there's different types. And so we were college students, like, how can we fix this? And that was where we came up with the concept for kind of an updated electrical outlet that had the cables built in, and then it evolved into a 2-part system that had the ability to bring the outlet with you. So you could just have we were very early in the battery pack, mobile battery pack, power bank kind of market in 2012.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And that's right into today, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, it's a theme of my career for sure, is mobile power and empowerment. Yeah.
Fast forward to today, the theme of your career. What are you doing at the Empowerment Project?
So the Empower Project is a culmination of all the different experiences I've had over the last almost 15 years in business and in inventing products and producing products.
Yeah.
And so, like I mentioned, that was my first product company, Fuel Box, was started at 20 at school. And we really learned the hard way. It took us about 4 years to figure out how to design and manufacture and fundraise and go to market with a product like this. That being like my MBA program, essentially.
Totally. It's exactly what that is. Yeah.
It was a really character building experience, is the nice way of saying it. And
people have not been there. You will not understand that. Just know it's insane.
If you want me to tell some more stories within that time period.
At least one. Just give the people who have no concept of what it is for creating, designing, and producing a product, what that actually is. And why. 4 years. That's actually fast, I think.
Yeah, that was when we really finally started shipping. And it wasn't even, that was when we started learning about sales and marketing, distribution, and stuff like that. So anyways, the first 4 years, which of course everybody thinks they're going to make it big in the first year, right? And then once you don't, the majority of the field will drop out. But I don't have quit in me. And that's another aspect of being born this way, is you figure it out and so you evolve until it works. And that's the story of my career, really, is evolve until it works. And that's the story of a lot of successful entrepreneurs, is you have to just evolve. You don't quit. So anyhow, the first 4 years, like, here's an example of the level of commitment you have to have in order to see something through. It's like we were able to raise about $50,000 out of school. So we did this kind of project within school with no budget, with a $500 budget. And then we were like, what are we going to do? Go on to other university? Or I burned my boat. So this is my first venture. I'm going for it. And we're able to raise about $50,000 from kind of family friends, right? This small, my brother-in-law was the first $5,000. And I learned how to attract money. And I think I talk a lot about fundraising, but the best fundraising efforts are when you get people to come to you versus you going to people for money. And the way to do that is there's various ways, but generally you ask for advice and not for money. You ask for mentorship and support, and then you get to a place where, like, wow, this is actually a pretty compelling business case. Mm-hmm. Hey, can I invest? Or I have a friend that might want to invest. And that's how you raise money.
Yeah.
So during that time, you come out of school. I'm 20 years old. And out of a 2-year college, right? And we got a little place in one of the first co-working spaces here in Santa Barbara. We got a desk there. So we found a home. My partner and I found a home for our business. It was like, I think $500 a month. So it was really affordable. And it was like, we basically lived in the space. And I was working at a tennis club here in Santa Barbara that gave me access to nice facilities and great people. And I played semi-professional tennis as a teenager. So I had that skill set. And it's a good networking skill set. So I leveraged that. You got to find your skill sets as fast as possible and leverage them to network. It's definitely a big piece of advice. But it was tennis lessons and that small paycheck that kept me alive, but it was still not, and I could pay my rent. It was still not, I couldn't dedicate enough hours to Fuel Box that I wanted. So I pitched a tent in my co-founder's backyard up on the Mesa here in Santa Barbara and lived in it for 6 months while I developed this company. And I had no rent. My closet was in the trunk of my car, and I used the tennis center as my shower and my bathroom. And it was actually amazing. Like, it was one of my favorite experiences. But that's the level of commitment that I had, and that is common amongst founders. I'm going all in. We were able to get a couple $100,000 in investments, and we were able to get the next levels of prototyping and production. And that was just in the first year. So it still took two or more years to get to market to actually start generating revenue for the business. So I think at that point we'd maybe raised $500,000 over those 2 or 3 years to get to that stage. So just incremental raises, seed rounds to get to that space. And that's where you either become a career entrepreneur or you never be an entrepreneur again. You realize this is not for me.
Whatever it takes is going to be different for everybody, but whatever it takes sounds like it gave you time. What else did it give you?
The mental health impacts of going this route are heavier than most, right? You have to have a very high pain tolerance or build up a pain tolerance, because emotional, mental pain tolerance, because you're pushing up against resistance and rejection almost every day, right? Essentially in every way, if you're trying to do something new. If you're just trying to create another yogurt shop or something, you're going to have less resistance. It's still hard, no matter what. You still have to get people in the door. You still have to figure out supply chain and do all that stuff. But it's not like you're trying to do a yogurt shop on the moon. You try to do that, you're going to have a lot more resistance. So anyways, that resistance has built up in a way that has caused crazy impacts, like very intense impacts on my own personal well-being and like my ability to maintain like a stable home life and relationships, and like impacted heavily by fully committed to a venture, which is why it's recommended to do this when you're just starting off, because you don't have kids and more responsibilities that have to be taken into consideration. So I could talk a lot about the downsides and the challenges, interpersonal challenges that I've had to deal with throughout my career by committing to this stage. But on the plus side, the network that I have within founders and investors and creators and people that build things is immense. I am so lucky to know and be known by folks that create a lot of what our world is. And I like to be a part of that community because I'm a builder and a creator. I like to be a part of that. And I've benefited personally from a lot of those relationships too, by being invited and included in all these different types of lifestyle activities that go along with your friend who just IPO'd a company for $2-3 billion. It's great to be friends with folks like that. You have a good time and you meet great people. And lifestyle, even if your personal income isn't there, you can live a way that your personal finances don't necessarily reflect. And that's a huge benefit. So I've lived a very beautiful and rich life, and my bank balance has not necessarily reflected that life. It's amazing. And then the perspective is by far the most valuable thing that I've built through the challenges that I went through. So perspective, I'd say, is like the experience affords you perspective, and your perspective is what is the value. Like if people can value their time at different rates, and your perspective, your knowledge is one thing, but knowledge is so readily available online. And especially with AI tools now, like you can get knowledge very cheap, $20 a month. You're going to get the access to the best knowledge in any field you want. But the perspective is what you pay for. The perspective is something you can't just get online. And that's what I've been able to curate. And I've paid millions of dollars over the years to get to this perspective. And now my perspective is worth a lot. And so that's a huge benefit. But those are the pros and cons of this experience thus far.
If you are ready to make a real impact in your business and you've waited too long to take action, go to reddirection.com and click on Solutions to find out how.
I know we started because you were like, I built this club at this college and here I am. And then your theme of your life came through that. And you had said somewhere in that transition about the skills. You've got to find your skills and you've got to leverage them quickly. What are the skills that maybe you didn't know you had that were able to be articulated in that journey that actually helped you get to this perspective today?
My ability to communicate, and communication, I think, is an undervalued or just not taught enough when it comes to entrepreneurship. Communication is everything, and being able to clearly communicate your vision, your intent, your struggles, not communicating your struggles and your challenges and your weaknesses is something that took me a long time to figure out how to do. Because the faster you can do that, the faster you can identify and communicate your weak points, the faster you can fill those in with people that those are their strong points, strong suits. So that's, but that all comes down to communication. And can I communicate that? Am I willing to communicate my vulnerability? Another one of my sayings is, as an entrepreneur, is life's a pitch. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, life's a pitch, and you're pitching everybody all the time, including yourself, and you're always working on it, always polishing that rugged stone into a polished stone, ideally. And so that is key, and that'll help you develop your communication. So the faster you can more clearly communicate what you're doing, and the better that communication becomes, is the faster you will become more successful or efficient at what you're trying to do.
It doesn't even matter what this is, right? It could be figuring out a marketing strategy. It could be figuring out how do you network and talk to people. It could be online ads that you're paying for Google. You have to have data, and the only way to get data is to do it over and over again. It falls apart when we don't know how to ask a question, when we don't know how to listen, when we are hearing some of what's going on around us, and we just gloss over because we have our own agenda. So the other side of communication is really that internalization. Can I really hear? Can I really shape?
Self-awareness, and then the other aspect that you just highlighted very well is courage. You have to be brave and courageous to go out there and to do this. You have to have the self-awareness to reflect upon how you're putting yourself out there and how it's being received and how you can improve it. And then be able to communicate that even better. So the self-awareness and the bravery and the ability to face rejection that's the persistence or perseverance. And no matter who you are, it will affect you. No matter how thick a skin you have, it will eventually soak through. There are aspects of entrepreneurship that only people that have really tried to start their own businesses can understand, because it's just like consistent heartbreak, consistent rejection, consistent pain that you have to overcome and not give in to yourself. Because let me tell you, when was the last time you had imposter syndrome or doubted something that was going on? Yesterday.
Me too.
Yeah.
Big time. Me too yesterday. And it never ends. Perspective is not a salve for that. It's going to be continuous.
I think the best salve is this, right? Is connecting with others that can understand and ideally provide value to the listeners or to anyone else. That's the only kind of reprieve that I've really felt is like, how can I let this help other people to not have to endure this level of pain? And that's like evolution in its living form. I appreciate these opportunities, and I really enjoy this kind of aspect of the work because it's promotional of what I do and whatnot. But more importantly, it's an opportunity for me to hopefully provide value to someone out there that's trying to do their own thing and be like, okay, here's an area I can work on self-awareness and communication and having courage. And no matter what, you're still going to get punched in the face every day. So you have to overcome it and be willing to do the old Rocky. It's not about how hard you can hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep getting up.
It really is like the Christmas story with the lunch money and the bullies every day sometimes. And people are like, that's just for a movie. I'm like, I'm not sure. Maybe, but there are paths of life where that just is the thing. And that's what it feels like. And you just go home and one day you break and it changes. But guess what happens? There'll be another one and there'll be another one. And you just put it on repeat. And so I appreciate your willingness to be so honest, because it is one of the reasons that I actually created this podcast, Robbie. It was specifically because we're not having enough of the tough conversations. And sometimes it's easier to talk about it here between 2 people or 3 people. And then other people can learn. And then by saying it out loud, that it is cathartic in a way. Wow, look how far I've come. Look how far I've come. And so part of that, look how far I've come. Oh, you want to say something about that?
There are lots of people saying it's lonely that doing this thing, or it's lonely at the top. Any founder can tell you that kind of thing, and that it's true. But I think more of this kind of discussion where it's how do we be less lonely? How do we support each other? How do we be a solution rather than just highlighting the fact that it's lonely and like still living in it so much? And I think there has been progress in like the co-working kind of spaces. That's a great way for like lonely creatives and inventors and innovators trying to not be so lonely and still help each other. And like these podcasts are fantastic opportunities for people to understand themselves better and to connect and whatnot. So yeah, I really appreciate you and everything you've done to get to this stage and for inviting me on as a guest.
By the way, everybody who's listening, Robbie and I have a common connection we didn't know we had until the first time that we talked, and it cracks me up. So I'm just going to do a shout out. Dan, if you were listening, Dan Engel, we have you in common, and you've already heard about this by now, but we'll just give you the shout out. To the point of the power of network, to the point of people who we never know we're going to have. When we put ourselves out there, when we're willing to communicate, when we're willing to have that self-awareness to keep going, we end up with people in common we didn't even know. We're in different states we've never met. We've actually both lived in Colorado, just at different times. We are both founders. We both have technology connections. I'm more on the service side of things. Robbie's more on the product side of things. But guess what? We still have commonalities that come from nowhere. So to your point, Robbie, about what we're doing here, that I think is a good illustration in one way, actually.
Yeah, and we're all just a few degrees of separation from each other, no matter who you are. So it's lovely when you get to connect those dots and see how we're all connected and we all want each other to succeed.
So when you get to the empowerment project and you get to the problems that you're solving today with all of the skills that you're bringing to the table, how do you discern what's in your control and really focus in on that?
I don't have a super difficult time identifying what I'm in control of and what I'm not in control of.
Okay.
But I do struggle with the ability to prioritize efforts and prioritize resources. And that's a constant role within any business, is like, how do I have X amount of dollars, I have X amount of support and team, I have this structure, I have these many customers or whatever, and you have to decide like where to allocate your time and resources. And that I have found is a more challenging aspect of what I can control or what I can't control. It's actually just prioritizing. Yeah, it's been a tough one.
So what are some ways that you help yourself?
Writing out your list, having whatever software. There's nothing that'll beat like a pen and paper because it activates different parts of your brain. So we also use the tools, and it's great to have the ability to just snap a photo now and that will transcribe it right into your notes or your platforms, your Asanas or HubSpots or whatever it is that you like to use. We can talk about all the different softwares and tools out there. But yeah, starting with what you can control, what can't you control, and then within the list that you can control, discussing it ideally with your team. I find it it's not a strong suit of mine, as you can probably hear in my voice and tell, organize and prioritize. So if you have someone who's more left brain, which my interim COO right now, his name's Joe Dobrisky, and he's the most impressive prioritization and kind of organization mind that I know that I've ever worked with. And he's so good at saying, okay, like at assigning value to each thing within our control, and then prioritizing what hit list needs to be knocked out first. Then you just set them up and knock them down. And that's the only way to actually get through the endless amount of tasks that you could be doing. And so I can't impress upon anybody enough that finding someone that can support you, if you're not in love with spreadsheet and love with the numbers and the specific like ability to just line things up really well, then find that person to complement you. And so that for me, that's my team, and I work with my team to support me in those regards. And then I just have to stick to the schedule, stick to the tasks, and that's it. That's been the way I do it.
How often do you make adjustments?
I am speaking this to myself more than anyone here. It is stick to the principles and do not adjust create a structure in which adjustments can be fit within. And so you don't change your platforms. I jump from one platform to another. This CRM is better. This social media scheduler is better. Let's go to this other social media scheduler. Like always trying to like jump ship to a new platform I've found has been a downfall for me. I lose so much productivity in trying to be on the better or more efficient systems. But if you just stick to your systems, so you get your systems and processes set up for yourself that are workable. They're not going to be perfect, but they're workable. You stick to those, then any of the adjustments that come in are still within your system. So you have the one calendar system, you have the one task list system. And if you're doing from paper to your team task list, you have Slack for your communications platform with your team. use Slack. Don't text, use Slack. Don't email, use Slack. Like, stick to your platforms and don't stray from them. And then all of the curveballs and all the wild things that come at you will still be organized within the structure of your systems and processes. And that's the only way to stay sane. And so don't change your systems and processes very often. Like, you're going to have to look at them, but look at them like once a year.
Focused on growth? Listen to more programs like this, which support the challenges and opportunities you are working with right now. Come on. Search Bold Business Podcast for the key terms at reddirection.com or your preferred podcast listening app.
When we're in technology and when things are moving so fast and when we're working with ways to communicate and be more efficient, it is the biggest shiny object that can detract a team and slow it down in momentum, because with that comes change management. With that comes adoption. With that comes with changing habits. And to your point, those structures and playing within those structures capitalize on the habits that are already in place.
When you get to a certain size of organization, those can be some of the biggest challenges, actually, is your systems and processes for those reasons. But when you're smaller or alone or just a very small team, like, it's incredible that you have to stay consistent. And that's been an area I've struggled with more than anything, is just consistency with the same platform. So I've been really working on just staying consistent in the structure of my systems and processes set up. And so that's...
Well, when I start looking at other ways to do things and new technologies, I'm like, oh, I really don't like the work I'm doing right now. Oh, yeah. I'm totally avoiding the things that actually need to be done. So I've turned that into, when I am doing this thing and when I'm jumping out of that, I have to go back to those priorities, because there might be something that a better question needs to be asked, or a refinement needs to be made, or something has already been done and we're actually redoing it and I haven't been able to articulate it yet, whatever it is. But that's my clue. Tune in.
You and I are very similar in that way, where like uprooting is a term that kind of encapsulates it, where I always feel like I need to change my website. I always, like, my product's never good enough. It's always, there's something better. A shiny object syndrome is like always fighting for my attention. That's a huge part of my battle as a manager, as an employee of my own business, and as an operator of my own life, keeping the blinders on or cutting out the uprooting and saying, I'm going to stick through this, because I'm able to do that in the long haul and like overall macro. Like, obviously I've been, my first business, Fuelbox, is still the parent company to the Empower Project. It's 12 or 13 years later. So it's been able to stick with it in that regard. But like, how many times I've pivoted into different spaces that I could, if I just like push through in one specific space and stick with it, I could have probably been a lot higher revenue and profitability in terms of just like the KPIs in business that we track. Like, they could have been probably multiples of where I'm at right now.
And I'm going to say, sure. And think about the impact you're making right now. Think about what the Empower Project is actually doing. Without all of those things, would you be exactly where you were right now?
I don't know what our time scale is here, like, not right now, but I'd love to just give you an overview of like how I came to where I'm at with the Empower Project.
You know what? I am excited for you to share that.
Yeah, great. I'll give you the story of my experience through my perspective of the why I've done what I've done and how I've come to where I'm at right now. So as I mentioned, I started Fuelbox with a partner at the Santa Barbara City College when I was 20 years old. And I fumbled my way into learning and experiencing how to build a business and how to develop a compelling project. But really it was self-motivated. Like, how do I make a living in a way in Santa Barbara, California, in a way where the income required is quite high to live a comfortable lifestyle. So it's okay. Like, essentially, like, how do I make millions? That's the thinking at 20 years old. How do I make millions and thrive here in this life, in this beautiful place that I love so much? I love Santa Barbara. It's fantastic. That was the motivation for the first 7 years, was how do I make this a business? How do I make this viable? And so we figured out how to sell product through direct online. We did $80,000 on a pre-order campaign. And then we went into just online sales. And it was just like, we were still trickling along, maybe $100,000 or $200,000 like a year. It was like, so a couple of us just trying to survive. And we were raising money just to like augment the business and get to that next stage. And then it was like, we're fatigued. We're 5 years in. We're not like making the income required. We're still surviving somehow, but we're not scaling. It's not getting to a place of like sustainability. So we met a guy that was in the B2B business. So he sold into hotel groups and to doing like corporate gifting and that whole business. And so that kind of took us up to the next level. It was like, all right. And he was fantastic. And so he joined as like our head of wholesale accounts, so head of sales there. And we went up to $500,000 and like maybe $500,000 to $1 million in sales. And all right, hey, like we all can pay ourselves like a livable wage in Santa Barbara. Like we've made it to another level. But and at this point, I'm 6 years in as the CEO, and I'm like, how the hell do I exit this business? Like, how do I get to a sale? This is not sustainable for me. Maybe at that point we were making $60,000 a month or $60,000 a year, $5,000 a month. It was just like, like Santa Barbara is you're not going to do well. And so you can imagine like how that affects your personal life. Like, how do you date like in that kind of situation? It doesn't go very well, which is very challenging. It creates a lot of mental health struggle, which affects your business more than anything. And I'm actually in the midst of writing a book right now. It's been years in the making, but it's the secret costs of building a company, like accounting for the unknown costs in starting a business, because by far and none, the most expensive cost in a business is the founder's mental health and like the management team's mental health. And like my own personal like ability to show up and perform. It's like the higher you're supported in your own personal life and like yourself, you're feeling centered, you really believe in what you're doing. You feel like your home life is like stable and your financial health is stable. Like those aspects can make your performance like top level at work. But it takes away from work to have to work on that stuff. So it's counterintuitive. But you're like, I don't need to sleep. I'll sleep at the office. I'll sleep in a tent in my co-founder's backyard for 6 months. I don't care. I'm going to make this thing happen. And then you're years in. So in this point in the story, I'm 6 years in. I'm now affording rent and like holding down decent relationships, but like still not feeling like well-centered, still not like feeling good about myself and my life at this point. So it's just like, how do I exit this business? How do I turn this company that we've raised, maybe at this point, we've raised like $700,000 to $1 million, and we've done like $1 million or $2 million in sales total. Mm-hmm. And so that's okay. At least it's something. Like we built something here. There's value here. How can I package and sell this? Or what level do I need to get it to be able to package and sell it? So I started looking for people that do mergers and acquisitions and getting advice from them and putting it out there to the world and being serendipitous about it. We got an opportunity so this is the next part of the story. So we got introduced to a gentleman at Verizon Federal that manages all of the federal side of Verizon's business, which is massive. And they did disaster relief work. So Operation OCR was set up by a guy named Jeff Schweitzer, who was a chief innovation architect at Verizon. So he's an amazing guy. He's now doing that at Amazon. But prior to that, he's a military background. He was hired by the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the Pentagon to clean up the aftermath of Katrina when that happened in New Orleans. So he's brought in to organize mass chaos and help get people out of it. So that natural disaster kind of response was his thing. So he set up this Operation Convergent Response for Verizon, and we were one of the small companies that were invited to attend. It was in this military training facility in Perry, Georgia, and it's like a couple 100 acres of mock subway stations, mock cityscapes, total 787s crashed and burnt, all kinds of crazy stuff. So that is where we got introduced to doing work with the government. And I was like, okay, this is B2B to the next level. And we designed and started making products that were like this here. A solar battery pack, we call the Survivor Pack, that was weatherproof and resistant to harsh use cases. We ended up working with the Department of Homeland Security after that. And I started spending a lot of time in Washington, D.C., saying, okay, this is an opportunity for us to work with large contract stuff. Yeah. And another company that was at that event had this seemingly incredible technology and was interested in acquiring us. So I said, okay, I got an acquisition opportunity. I'm going all in on this. I am so tired just making scraps to get by. So I've got the opportunity with the government and I'm going to leverage that pursuit with this other group to buy us. So the next 8 months, and during that time, I brought on like a seasoned CEO who was way too advanced for what we needed, and we couldn't afford him. And so it was just created a really
stress
position to be in as a founder, bringing the CEO that is $30,000 a month kind of thing. And we're like, I could take you to the next level, but it just didn't have enough dynamic for him to work with. He's used to companies with 50 to 100 people already and resources to manage, not like creating the resources. So that was like a tough situation internally. And then externally, I'm just battling to get the company packaged and sold and looking for big contracts to go after with the government. So 6 months later, maybe 6 to 8 months later, through a couple $100,000 in legal and me just being relentless in pursuit to sell this business, we get a $7 million acquisition purchase agreement. So it was a company out of Hawaii. And I was relentless. I was like, I'm closing this deal more than anything in my life. I'm closing this deal. And I got the price to $7 million, which my original investors would have got 12x on their money. And the latest investors would have 3x their money within a year or two. And so it was like, I'm doing it. I'm exiting. And my partner and I would have walked away with 1.5 each or 1.7 each. So it was like a win, such a win. Signed the purchase agreement. We were going to be operating as a company. They were doing a roll-up strategy, buying a bunch of companies, and we were going to operate one division of it. And the contracts with the budget, I had a $10 million operating budget. I had a $300K a year salary. I had a signing bonus. I had $21 million in options and the parent company. I was like, oh, I finally made it. It was amazing. All my investors at that point, I had 30 some investors, 7 employees. Everybody was rich, like in my mind. That was just like, we did it. Success. And then the money never showed up.
Oh.
And it was like a week later. So funds still haven't been transferred. Like, what's going on? Oh, CEO and I of that company, some issues with banking, blah, blah, blah. 2 weeks go by, 3 weeks go by. My attorney, who was like the same attorney as Facebook, we had like spending $1,000 an hour on, was like, I don't know what's going on. I can't tell you what the deal is here. So it's like you're on top of the world for a second, and then it just came crashing down, and everything was just like, and I was so for about 2 to 3 weeks, I was in the seat that I feel like I was born to be in. I was like, the CMO of Tesla at the time was going to come join. The VP of marketing at Tesla was going to come join our team. I had a CTO who was like the most brilliant man. We were so lucky. He was going to be joining as a CTO. I had a letter of intent on a building we were going to be operating in. I had all these employees coming in that were like rock stars. And I was like, yes, like I have a budget. I can do these things. This technology, this company, I thought they had was remarkable in relation to power. And so when it all came crashing down, it was like the darkest depression I've ever been in. It was so difficult. And meanwhile, my company had $20,000 in the bank, and it, like all of my employees decimated. All of my investors who thought they just got big returns were just not happy with me. And I don't know all the details, but it was like for a year, I was trying to make it happen still after that. And they ended up having all their assets seized by the SEC. And it was just like, they never really could come through. So it was just like a really hard lesson for me to learn, like, you can't go all in on an opportunity, even if you're totally like desperate for one, because you have to still operate your business. And so it came back down to like my co-founder and I, and at this point we hated each other and we had so many resentments build up, and it was like just a brutal time. But luckily I was able to close a deal with Homeland Security for $700,000. So I was able to close a deal after that all happened for $700,000.
Nice.
How
long? Yeah. How long?
The contract?
Was it within that year of trying to get the other money that it happened? Okay. Within the
I think within 6 months, we were back to not paying ourselves or back to surviving on credit cards and figuring it out. Okay. It was somewhere in that 6 months where this thing started to show, even though I had
this place, but you were in this very dire, bad, dark place.
It's such an emotional time for me because the blowout between my co-founder and I was like extremely heavy in public, and he had to leave the company, forced a shareholder agreement and a shareholder meeting. And it was like by far the worst meeting I've ever attended. And he ended up exiting the company. So I'm like, all right, now I'm operating this thing. I have the contracts, I have the relationships. And I was using my design firm at the time as a supportive system. Like they had the ability to support supply chains, and it really partnered up a bit. And in supporting the deal, I was able to close funding for it and to be able to support the production and deliver on the deal. And I was pregnant with my daughter, with my partner. So during that time, we were going to have a baby. And I needed money desperately. And so it was like that contract came in and we got paid on it like the week my daughter was born, 12 weeks premature. She was very early. But yeah, so it was just a real godsend that we were able to close that contract, get paid on it. My daughter came into this world healthy. Even though it was very early, she was fine. And we had an amazing team to support us. But so it was like huge, awful divorce with the partnership at work. Terrible. And so it's like, not only is the pain of like that deal, the acquisition, my 7-year journey to exit, falling out and being completely flat broke in debt kind of thing. But then the awful fallout, divorce with the partner, the co-founder, and then like, premature baby. And it's like, oh my gosh, but at least, the silver lining is like, close that deal. I was able to get like my first paycheck that was like 30 grand or something, $40,000. That was like so necessary for me when my daughter was born.
Yeah.
And then it was like, we left the hospital. It was like February 2nd, 2020. And then COVID. So welcome to COVID. So that was the lead up into COVID for me.
You're listening to the Bold Business Podcast, hosted by Jess Dewell, a nationally recognized strategic growth consultant. She works with business owners and executives to integrate just 2 elements that guide business through the ups and downs of growth. Number 1, know what work is necessary. Number 2, do all the work possible. Schedule a complimentary consultation to find out more at reddirection.com.
And I have a little baby that's my world, and she's been
toddler, right? So what, 4?
She's 4.5 now.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's another part to this. So during that transition, when I was being supported by my design agency so much on operational stuff as well to deliver on that deal with Homeland Security, meanwhile, my business shifted from B2B and direct online sales just to doing this contract, just to working with the government. And I was like, okay, this is an opportunity. And as I built those relationships, which took a lot of work and a lot of time in DC and a lot of legwork, which folks that are in operations don't understand how much it takes to develop relationships. Just because they have access to their email online or whatever, it takes years of like referrals in and time and developing relationships. Anyhow.
Right.
But my partners at the agency and I were like, there's an opportunity to do a lot more products, like modernizing equipment for military and for like tactical users that like beyond just power. And I was like, great, let's spin up another company. So I started Bunker Supply Company with my co-founder there. We created Bunker to modernize equipment for tactical users in the Department of Defense and Homeland Security and those types of use cases. And his agency and his background could support rapid development, prototyping, and my like business development and opportunity to folks within Fuelbox's network was what I brought to the table. So the idea was to merge Fuelbox into Bunker Supply, and that was my initiative with the team there. Unfortunately, my co-founders at Bunker had different ideas. And so they pushed me out. I had 3 co-founders there, and they pushed me out in an unexpected surprise thing that turned into litigation for a year. And basically, at the end of the day, it's okay, I'm exiting this new business that's blowing up and doing very well. And just being like completely, there was red flags throughout the process that I chose to ignore.
Hindsight, you saw. It sounded like there was some trust on your part that the red flags might not have been red flags because of the way the work was being done together. And the common end goal is what I'm hearing.
The common end goal, and it's just there's a lot of factors that go into these relationships. There was a lot of resentments being withheld, and ultimately the communication broke down, and the communication and trust factors broke down, and then that's what happens is in any type of relationship, whether that's business or personal. It was very unfortunate, but I was able to exit in a way that was like put me into a decent position financially, and Fuelbox in a decent position. So I still had fuel box and that had some like maybe $1 million in the bank. At this point, I'm really doing a lot of interpersonal work, like really reflecting, what is it like, what's my purpose here? And so it was like a decade in where I started looking at what's my purpose. And I think it takes some time. I love founders that are really young that have that are purpose or mission driven, but I wasn't, right? Like my purpose and mission was like, how do I survive? How do I make a living? How do I thrive? That was my drive. But now after going through so much and after like making a living and surviving and going through enough, we're like, why am I doing this? What's my why? Simon Sinek, what's my why? What's my purpose? Yeah. And that's when I was like, by far my favorite work was when we got to do hurricane relief with Verizon through Operation Convergent Response. They bought out all of our products. I didn't mention this, but at one point we had $80,000 of inventory of our battery packs. They bought them all when Hurricane Irma hit and sent them to Mexico Beach, Florida, where the community had just been destroyed and the grids were down. Mm-hmm. So portable power was super valuable. Like people would pay whatever it took to be able to communicate. And FEMA funded that. So we even got paid for those units were purchased by FEMA. But I was like, in retrospect, at the beginning of the Empower Project, I was like, how can we do that for free for people? Like, how can I do that work that feels good, that I'm proud of when people are like, this saved my life. Was able to get communication with my children that were displaced and the networks are down and we're all just in fight or flight. So I was like, that's what I want to do. I was like, okay. So that was my why with the Empower Project. I had some money from the deals that we did, and I've got this entity fuel box, and so I'm still in the power space. And at Bunker, we did other projects that were in armor and like really cool efficiency improvements within products within the Navy, and I got to do work with Navy, and it was just really fun. Wetsuits and good, cool stuff like that. Got to branch out a little bit, but then as that kind of imploded for me, I go, okay, I'm back to power, right? Back to Empower. And I was like, the Empower Project just came to me because I wanted to do disaster relief work. And so it's like, all right, I don't want to make it a nonprofit necessarily. Let's do the Tom Shoe model. Let's do the Warby Parker model where we buy one, donate one, buy one, give one. So that's where the Empower Project started. We've got these solar battery packs that are great and they last a long time. And if there's no grid, they can be charged from the sun. And then I was like, okay, well, let's design a really sleek, cool, everyday, like Dyson vacuum version of charging your phone. And that's where I designed the Empower Pack and the Empower Dock, and the most sleek and modern wireless charging system where the battery pack is MagSafe and the dock is really beautiful and weighted and sits really well and lives in your environment better than just obtrusive tech. And so this two-part system with flow-through charging I worked with an incredible design firm out of Chicago, Minimal, and designed this system where this battery pack is really innovative. And we created what I think is the best charging product on the market. I have 3 pillars to this new business that cultivated throughout my whole career. It's driven by purpose. Like, we have to do something that matters, that isn't money related. I want to support people when they need it the most, when they're in crisis. And we know how to do that through the work we did with FEMA and Verizon and Nokia. And that was awesome. So I was like, all right, let's do more of that. And now it's like, how do we pay for that? How do we make a viable business out of that? Let's make the best charging system on the market, because I'm a product fanatic myself. I'm a design geek. I spend tons of time on Pinterest and like within design systems, just figuring out exactly what I want. And I've been studying the way we charge our phones for over a decade. So I know the product space very well. Yeah. And I like to think I have a good eye for design. So that's where the design pillar, the design philosophy, I'd like to be the Dyson of our category. James Dyson made vacuuming fun, and where you have a dopamine release when you vacuum. I want to have that same experience when you charge your phone, which seems like a mundane thing, but we all have to do it. So that's what the product set for the Empower Project has created. And so the social impact is the drive. The design philosophy is the sale, we actually make the money. And then the third piece is I've always felt I've sold and distributed tens of thousands of products over my career. And after a few years, they end up in a landfill. And I feel that in my gut. I do not like that. It feels awful. It goes against who I am. And what I try to do as a person is leave a positive impact, ideally a negative carbon footprint when I leave this planet. But I've done this because that's the way the industry is built, and it's really hard to change the industry. So on this go around, I've been working my tail off. My team has been working so hard to find bio-based plastics that work, to have a recycling program with every battery that we can get returned from a customer when it's lived its life. We'll send it to our partner, Ascend Elements, to replace 98%, to recycle 98% of the battery, put it back in our supply chain. I want a fully circular supply chain, and bio-based materials are available using cork on the footer versus a silicone. And that's the sustainability piece, and the planet piece is our third pillar. So we've got the social impact, which is my heart and my purpose. We've got the design, which is so fun and it's really well done. And yeah, I'd put it up against anybody on the market. And then the sustainability piece is the afterlife thought, like how do we actually support this world and our children's world? So that's brought me to the Empower Project. That is the Empower Project. And now I'm here just trying to promote it. I'm trying to get distribution, really working on and it's still a battle. It's a battle. I'm still working with small resources and have not scaled this business yet. So I'm working on scaling it now, and that's where I'm at.
You know what? You're going to have to come back in a year and be like, how's the scaling going? Because I like to follow companies like this. And now that our listeners have had this, we've had a couple of companies come back and check in with us. How did you do? What did you do? Some continued, some pivoted, some didn't. So it's interesting. And I think that's a really cool. I think it's really cool on all fronts. I even think the hardship is cool because it was only through those you were able to really decide that's what you wanted the Empower Project to be. Now, yes, that's a silver lining. And the work of working through all of the stuff that has been going on for you for a few years may still be going on. And I wish to highlight that, because that type of self-work, that type of self-care, that type of being able to look in a mirror and go, wow, this is the good, the bad, the ugly. Wow, how do I actually feel about this? There are not positive feelings. There are not good things that come into that. And I think that needs to be honored as much to put you exactly where you are right here.
Like I said, I thank you for the opportunity to share my story and to give a glimpse into, or a window into, kind of the lifestyle and the realities of trying to do something different or good, and or like just be a success story myself. And so thank you. Thank you for that.
So what makes it bold? What makes it bold to just keep going?
I think the bold part comes in the face of criticism, rejection, fear, and that more than anyone from yourself. I don't think anybody's harsher on me than myself. And I think that's true for everybody. We are our own worst critics. You have to be bold to try to stand in integrity with your mission. And that's like, that pain threshold can go up. And I'm experiencing that right now. Like I have to modify our mission, our donation aspect, in order to sell enough product to sustain the business. So you got to be bold to be able to do that. And I think that there's opportunities throughout every part of the business that you have to be bold in.
Wow! Jess hosts the Bold Business Podcast to provide insights for building a resilient, profitable business by deeply understanding your growth strategy, ensuring market relevance, and your company's future. It is bold to deeply understand your growth strategy with your host, Jess Dewell. Get more information about how to drive solutions and reset your growth mindset at reddirection.com. Thank you for joining us, and special thanks to our post-production team at The Scott Treatment.